It's officially Combine Week here in Indianapolis, and the spotlight is once again on the Philadelphia Eagles as the 2026 NFL Combine gets underway at Lucas Oil Stadium. Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman are scheduled to speak back-to-back on Tuesday, 2:45 p.m. for Sirianni and 3 House p.m. for Roseman. And for the first time since the end-of-season press conference, they'll face the media to address the direction of this team. And there is no shortage of storylines. Let's start with something that dominated headlines last offseason, but suddenly disappeared, with the Tush push. According to Adam Schefter, no team among the 32 has submitted a proposal to ban the play, and there have been no recent discussions about changing the rule, as confirmed by Rich McKay. Just a year ago, this was arguably the biggest topic at the Combine. General managers and head coaches lined up to question its safety, despite the NFL conducting studies that showed no increased injury risk. The Eagles had to defend it publicly, and even Jason Kelce gave a passionate speech supporting it, but now, silence. Why? Because the Eagles weren't nearly as dominant with it in 2025. The numbers tell the story. In 2022, the Eagles converted 29 of 34 attempts, an 85.3% success rate. In 2023, they were even better, 36 of 41, good for 87.8%. In 2024, that dipped slightly to 81% at 34 of 42, but in 2025, the decline was real. Late December, figures showed them at 17 of 25, just 68%. They finished the year below 70%. Injuries along the offensive line, inconsistencies up front, ball security issues, and a less effective execution overall forced them to scale it back. By season's end, they weren't even relying on it the same way. And that leads to a bigger question. With Sean Mannion now stepping in as offensive coordinator, will the Tush push even remain a staple? Mannion was playing as recently as 2023. He has just 2 years of coaching experience and has never called plays. This is a bold move, a risk, but also an aggressive swing by this organization. The Eagles are betting on upside. Mannion is bringing in new offensive assistants, and there's legitimate speculation about a philosophical shift. Could we see elements inspired by Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Clint Kubiak, or Kevin Stefanski? Or will it be a hybrid that blends modern concepts with what Nick Sirianni has built since 2021? The offensive identity of this team could look very different in 2026. And that ties directly into another major development, Jeff Stoutland's departure after 13 years with the organization. One of the best assistant coaches in franchise history is no longer leading the offensive line room. Chris Cooper takes over, and this isn't just a coaching change, as it could signal a philosophical shift in blocking schemes and line technique. Stoutland's teaching pillars were not rooted in the McVay-Shanahan system tree. If the Eagles are modernizing their offense structurally, that could explain the transition. Now let's talk about the storyline that could dominate Tuesday's press conferences. A.J. Brown. Will he be an Eagle in 2026? Howie Roseman's phrasing will matter. If he slams the door shut, that's one thing. If he leaves it slightly open, the speculation will explode. Financially, it would be difficult to move him due to dead money implications, but if the organization views any situation as a distraction, tough decisions can happen. From a football standpoint, trading A.J. Brown does not make this team better, but the question will be asked. On defense, there's another layer. The Eagles only have 2 edge rushers under contract for 2026, Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. Nolan Smith has steadily improved and could be in line for an extension around $15 million per year in a market where elite pass rushers like TJ Watt, Max Crosby, and Micah Parsons are commanding $30 to $40 million annually. Locking up Smith at that number would be strong value if he continues ascending. Speaking of Crosby, the Raiders reportedly want 2 first-round picks. That price is steep. For a generational player, you consider it, but every negotiation starts high. The Eagles must decide whether to make a splash acquisition or continue building through the draft. Howie Roseman stated after the season that they've drafted and developed on defense while spending heavily on offense. That balance may shift. Extensions for defensive standouts like Jalen Carter are looming. Financial flexibility matters. There are free agent decisions ahead as well. Brandon Graham, Josh Uche, and others are hitting the market. Who returns? Who walks? How close was Vic Fangio to retiring before this offseason settled? There were even rumblings about potential defensive coordinator contingencies. The point is this This week isn't just about 40-yard dash times and draft boards. It's about clarity, direction, tone setting for 2026. Nick Sirianni enters the year under pressure after a wildcard exit. The offense is changing. The defense has financial crossroads ahead, and the Eagles remain firmly in a Super Bowl window. But transitions are happening, so here's the question for you. Which storyline concerns you the most heading into this combine? The offensive overhaul, the A.J. Brown uncertainty, or the future of this defensive core? Because when you really step back and look at where this organization stands, you realize this isn't just a routine offseason. This is a pivot point, a recalibration moment for a team that still believes it can compete for a championship, but understands that adjustments are necessary after the way 2025 ended. Let's stay with the defense for a second, because that side of the ball is quietly approaching a financial storm. Howie Roseman made it clear after the season that the Eagles have drafted and developed extremely well defensively. That pipeline includes Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, Jalen Carter, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and others who are either entering extension windows soon or will be shortly after. When you build through the draft successfully, eventually you have to pay those players. That's the price of development, and that's why the Nolan Smith extension chatter matters. If you can secure him around $15 million per year before the edge market inflates further, that could be a proactive move that looks like a bargain in 2 seasons. He's physical, plays bigger than his frame, and brings energy and edge-setting ability that fits the identity this defense wants. But committing money there impacts what you can do elsewhere. Now think about this. The Eagles currently have just 2 edge rushers under contract for 2026. Smith and Hunt. Brandon Graham is a free agent. Josh Uche is a free agent. That room needs reinforcement, so the question becomes, do you invest draft capital or do you swing big? The Max Crosby conversation is fascinating. The Raiders' reported asking price of 2 first-round picks is steep, and while Crosby is elite, you have to weigh value against long-term roster construction. Giving up that level of draft capital means fewer cost-controlled players in the coming years, and that matters when extensions for your young core are looming. Howie has always believed in flexibility. Would he compromise that for one marquee addition? That's something we'll be listening for when he steps to the podium. Now let's pivot back to the offense, because that side of the ball is undergoing a philosophical evaluation. Sean Mannion stepping in as offensive coordinator is bold. He has never called plays at the NFL level. He was playing as recently as 2023. That's not a traditional trajectory to OC. But sometimes organizations value perspective and football IQ over tenure. The Eagles are betting on projection. The key question is this: are they modernizing or are they evolving? There's a difference. Modernizing would suggest a more motion-heavy, under-center, play-action-based attack inspired by systems like those run by Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan. Evolving would mean maintaining the core principles that made this offense productive under Nick Sirianni, but refining them with new sequencing and creativity. And then there's the offensive line transition. Jeff Stoutland was here for 13 years. That kind of continuity is rare. Chris Cooper stepping in represents not just a name change, but potentially a teaching shift. Offensive line philosophy is deeply rooted in technique, hand placement, footwork, leverage angles, blocking rules in zone versus gap schemes. If the Eagles adjust their offensive structure, the line has to adjust with it. That's not small. All of this connects back to the tush-push conversation. The league stopped talking about banning it because the Eagles stopped dominating with it. That's how the NFL works. Success breeds scrutiny, struggles breed silence. But if this offense evolves and regains its edge in short yardage situations, don't be surprised if the conversation resurfaces next year. Now we circle back to A.J. Brown, because here's the reality. His presence changes defensive alignments. He dictates coverage. Even when he's not targeted, he impacts spacing. Moving him would not just be a roster transaction. It would fundamentally alter how defenses play the Eagles. That's why Howie's wording tomorrow will be dissected nationally. Does he shut it down? Does he say, we're always evaluating? Every syllable matters. And let's not forget Lane Johnson returning in 2026. That's stability. That's leadership. That's elite tackle play anchoring the right side. But alongside that, there are questions about other veteran leaders and how long this core window truly stays open before financial reality forces tougher cuts. Free agency opens March 9th with the legal tampering window. The draft is at the end of April. The timeline is moving fast, decisions are coming quickly, and this combine week is where groundwork gets laid, not just publicly at podiums, but privately in meetings between agents, executives, and coaching staffs. So when Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman speak, it won't just be about answering questions. It will be about signaling direction, about projecting confidence, about showing that despite a wildcard exit, this organization believes its foundation remains strong. And that brings us right back to you. If you're looking at this roster today, the coaching changes, the financial crossroads on defense, the AJ Brown speculation, the offensive identity shift, do you feel this is a retool that keeps the Super Bowl window wide open, or are we witnessing the beginning of a more significant transition period for the Philadelphia Eagles? Let me know what you think and make sure you're locked in, because this week in Indianapolis could define the entire 2026 season. Because the truth is, this week in Indianapolis isn't just about prospects running 40-yard dashes, it's about leverage. It's about information gathering. It's about positioning yourself for what's coming in March and April. And for the Philadelphia Eagles, the margin for error is thinner now than it was 2 years ago. When you're drafting and developing well, eventually you pay the bill. That's where this team stands. Jalen Carter is going to command serious money when his time comes. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are ascending pieces in the secondary. Nolan Smith is already part of the extension conversation. The Eagles have built a defensive nucleus that is young, explosive, and fast, but youth eventually becomes expensive experience. Howie Roseman has always operated 2 years ahead of the curve. That's why this combine matters so much. Do the Eagles lean into the strength of this draft class at a certain position? Do they target offensive skill depth because they anticipate future cap strain? Or do they double down on the defensive front because that's been the backbone of championship teams in Philadelphia? And then there's the psychological element. Nick Sirianni enters 2026 under more pressure than he has faced since taking the job. A wild card exit changes perception quickly in this league. The hot seat talk isn't deafening, but it exists. That means the offensive coordinator hire wasn't just about scheme, it was about trust. Sirianni putting his reputation on the line with Sean Mannion is a defining decision. If it works, he looks visionary. If it falters, scrutiny intensifies. This is also where leadership inside the locker room becomes critical. Lane Johnson returning provides continuity. That presence matters, especially with coaching transitions happening around him. Stability at right tackle gives this offense an anchor point as everything else potentially evolves. Now, zoom out and consider the broader NFC landscape. The Eagles are not rebuilding. They're not tearing this down. They're recalibrating while still believing they can contend. That's a delicate balance. You can't mortgage the future recklessly, but you also can't waste a championship window by playing it too safe. That's why the Max Crosby type discussions exist. Even if the asking price is high, you evaluate it. You weigh the immediate defensive impact against long-term draft capital. You ask yourself whether pairing a premier pass rusher with your current core pushes you over the top, or whether depth and flexibility serve you better in the long run. The same logic applies to AJ Brown. If you move him, you're not just shifting cap numbers, you're shifting identity. You're signaling a philosophical pivot. The Eagles'